All right. Well, since we're at 101, I guess we'll get kicked off. It gives me great pleasure today to introduce Ian Moore from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, who have generously supported moving a bunch of their data sets into the RDC. We're here to learn about one of them today, and assuming things
hmm
go well, Ian and his team have agreed to come back and present some of the other ones as they roll into the centers also. Just some general housekeeping. We're going to give Ian space to present, and then we do the open mic part where you can kind of just ask questions. So during the presentation, if you can make sure your mic is muted and your video is off so that there's no distractions for Ian while he's talking, that's perfect. And before I turn it over, I'll just kick off with a quick land acknowledgement. For McMaster University, the host institution for the Canadian Research Data Center Network, is located on the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee Nations, within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. We begin our session today by giving honor and thanks to the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations, and recognize our responsibility to respect and honor the intimate relationship Indigenous people have to this land. You can visit Native Land Digital, a space where non-Indigenous and Indigenous people can learn more about the lands they inhabit, the history of those lands, and how to actively be part of a better future going forward together. And with that, without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Ian.
Thanks, Grant. Thanks for that land introduction. Thanks for the introduction in general. Yeah, folks, very happy to be here in front of this network for this open mic event, just to present to you some information about our rental market survey. I am joined today by Pierre Lancio, who's simply observing because he'll be repeating this in French next week while I'm away for the Quebec-based group. Also on the line with me is Shima Tavasali. She's one of my senior data analysts. She's available to answer any technical. There's Pierre. Any technical questions that you may have, if need be. And also Zhuxuan Zhang, who is again one of my senior data analysts. And Zhuxuan will actually be the senior data analyst on our side, on CMHC side, who would work with the RDC analysts in helping with the research proposals and understanding the data, understanding how to work with the data and how to interpret the data. So those are the folks from CMHC who are joining me now. I am going to I'll just stop my video for now and you can just focus on the presentation. Hopefully everyone can still see it. I'm showing as I'm.
Yeah, we can still see it. Oh, nope, now it went away.
Okay, I'll go. There we go.
There we
And
are.
it's visible now. Perfect. Okay, so like Grant mentioned, we are for the very first time going to be releasing our housing surveys data sets to the RDCs. We're starting with, or we've already published our RMS data, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that data looks like, its extensiveness, that sort of thing. And as some of you may know, some of you may not know, we run some of the largest housing survey programs in Canada. We've been doing them for a long time, and one of them, for example, one of our longest running ones is our starts and completion survey. So actually, that's the next data set that we hope to publish to the RDC. So it's all of our data sets basically on new home construction. But again, we'll return to this group in the new year to present on that. For today, I just want to focus on the rental market survey. So what I really want to do, the idea here with this presentation, is just to simply introduce you folks to our rental market survey, our RMS as we call it. Some of you may be quite familiar with it, some of you maybe not, but that is mainly the goal here. Obviously, we're not going to dive deep into different research ideas that you might have. There's not the time for that. It's really just to familiarize yourselves with our survey. I want to talk a little bit about how we collect the data, methodology. I'll do a very short demonstration of just how we disseminate it through our housing market information portal. Some of you might be familiar with the portal. It's my team that manages the portal and places the data, publishes our housing surveys data to our portal as part of our duties. It's one of our main one of the main data products that we do produce at CMHC. And then I'll talk a little bit about what the RMS data looks like in the RDC. Run through very quickly a few little use cases that we've done in the past. And then we'll open it up for the open mic portion. So just to give you an idea of our rental market survey scope, this is one of our, not our longest running, but it's one of our longest running surveys. We started it in 1971 as the apartment vacancy survey, where we collected data just on vacant units. In around 1986, 1987 or so, we added rent, and it became the rental market survey as you may know it now. We conduct it every year annually. It's an annual survey in October. We do it for all urban centers, and we define that as all centers with more than 10,000 population. And our scope is, it covers all row, or what some folks might refer to as side-by-side townhouse buildings, as well as apartment buildings. They have to have 3 or more rented units, okay, 3 or more units that they are renting out. This survey is largely collected by telephone survey. It's real boots on the ground. We have field enumerators that contact mom and pop landlords, major property management companies, on-site representatives, and they conduct it largely by telephone, although nowadays we are getting more and more administrative data. So we are being provided by large property management companies very large rent roll data, data right down to the individual unit levels in their buildings, which we then upload into our own data set. We, of course, destroy the rent rolls after we're done with them, but that has become a much more common way in which we are able to obtain our data. It's much more efficient than in the past, when we used to sit in the leasing offices and literally physically go through a paper rent roll that could be tens of pages long. So like I mentioned, respondents are typically the landlords, property management companies, or their on-site representatives. We do publish the data to our housing market information portal. That's, again, one of the main data products that we have at CMHC that my team is responsible for. We do what's called static data tables. So if the data is not quite sliced and diced in a certain way on the portal, there might be some other tabulations that we'll do, and we'll just post it as a static data table product. Our portal is a little bit old and rickety, so until we replace it with something more modern, we have to do a little bit of both static tables and our standard release of data on the portal. My team is also responsible for doing custom data requests for various internal and external clients, and we do that as a fee. And then, of course, the new thing that I'm happy to be here announcing is that we're going to put that microdata into the research data center. So that's a big jump for us. It's still new to us, so just bear with us. We have published the data now to the RDC, and we've had initial vetting guidelines from StatsCan, and I'll talk just a little bit briefly about that towards the end of the presentation. The data that we collect or that we can disseminate typically is vacant units. We collect information on how many empty or vacant units are in landlords' buildings, how many units have turned over. We collect rent points. We are able to isolate rents of units that are occupied versus rents that are vacant, or what are the asking rents. Around COVID time, we asked some questions about arrears because we wanted to know the impact on the industry. That was a huge economic shock, right? COVID, lots of job loss. So we want to see the impact on both tenants and the industry. So we asked questions about how many units and what is the dollar value in rent that's in arrears, more than 30 days past due. And there's all kinds of building characteristics, amenities, and geolocation details, a lot of it tied to StatsCan standard geographic classification. That is embedded in the data. And again, I'll go over all that in detail in just a second. All of that information will be available at the individual building address level, although the addresses themselves will, of course, be masked. as well as all calculated weights that we use to publish our estimates. Again, I'll go into more detail about that in a moment. To get an idea of our survey, so I just want to dive just a little bit in terms of how the survey is conducted, how we frame the survey, as well as the questions we ask. So how is the data collected? I'll walk you through the questionnaire really briefly as well. We do a stratified sampling approach in the sense that we have what's called a take-all strata, or a census, so to speak, if you want to call it that. So every year we do survey any new buildings that come into our rental market survey, and we maintain our list of addresses or our list of buildings thanks to our starts and completion survey. So we're tracking new construction all the time, monthly, from our starts and completion survey. And so any building that is completed within a certain time frame, that those addresses are picked up and moved over to our rental market survey database. So our starts and completion survey constantly refreshes the list of building addresses that we have available to us to sample and to conduct the rental market survey. We will do a take-all strata for all new buildings, for all row or townhouse structures, as you see on the screen here, all large apartment buildings that are greater than 50 units. They can have a big impact on results, right? They're quite large. So we ensure that we survey those or sample those every year without fail. And there are certain smaller centers that have quite a small, what we call a RMS universe. Our term universe can be used synonymously with survey population. There are some smaller centers have very small rental markets, very small universes. So we will survey all of the buildings in those small centers every year without fail. They're done as a census. So that kind of leaves essentially a sample of apartments between 3 and 49 units. So just apartment buildings, they're stacked, right? Those are your high rises, your mid rises more or less, and your walk-ups between 3 and 49 units. That's where we will do sampling. Our sample size is about 32% of all rental structures. Like overall, when you take into account the take-all strata as well as the sample strata, it's about a third of all rental structures. But they represent about 70% of the units. So it's a fairly large sample. We do a 30%, or again, another third of that sample overlaps with the sample that we took last year. We do that because we do have some year-over-year percentage change in rents comparisons, so same sample rent comparisons that we like to do. And in order to do that, we have to have a good representative sample size that overlaps so that we can do that comparison and remove any compositional effects of new buildings, right? It gives us an idea of where our rents headed in the existing stock. So what does that mean for the 2025 survey, which we literally just finished? We're going to be releasing those results next Thursday, the 11th of December. It's a massive survey. So we will have collected data on about 1.68 million units out of a total universe across the country of nearly 2.5 million purpose-built rental units. There's no one doing as large, as comprehensive of a survey of Canada's rental market than us. Our response rate remains healthy. I like to say that it's very much a business-to-business type of survey. So we don't get the respondent hanging up as much. It happens, but not as much, just because the industry's invested in this survey. They want to know the results. They encourage their folks to participate. So in 2025, it's always stayed steady around 66 to 69% response rate. So it's quite healthy. Just walking you through the interview questions that we asked, just so that, again, you're just familiar with how we collect this information. The first thing we always do is, of course, confirm that the folks still own the building. There is a lot of buildings changing hands nowadays. We do confirm that, are you the owner of this apartment building on 123 Main Street? We will confirm always the number of units. We'll always make sure that we have what we call a completion date, so that we can also report on, we can do rental market estimates based on the age of the buildings, age of the stock. We also confirm the bedroom breakdown, just to make sure that that's all accurate. 100-unit building, we might say we're showing it as 52 bedrooms and 53 bedrooms. Is that correct? It's that sort of thing. So it's just confirming building details. We next then dive into the detailed rent and vacancy information. And as you can see in the questions, we want to make sure that all rent points are gathered. So we ask them, from these X number of studios or one bedrooms, how many units are vacant at this time? So we confirm the vacancy overall for the buildings by bedroom type. And then we dive into questions about the rent. So we'll ask questions like, we would introduce it as we're now going to ask you some questions about the rent. What is the lowest rent? And we will go by bedroom type. What is the lowest rent for one bedroom units in this building? And how many units rent for that amount? What's the next highest rent? How many rent for that? What's the next highest? We keep doing that until we've exhausted all the rent points. We really try to avoid having respondents provide us with ranges. If they do, we like to keep them within maybe $10 so that we don't have too big of a midpoint that we take. But as you can see, the sequencing of the question just ensures that we try to get each and every individual rent point. We then ask for how many what units are vacant at those different rent points. And if any vacant units are not accounted for, we'll ask we'll double check with them. If there's some vacant units that are not accounted for from the rent questions that we just asked, all the rent levels that they had provided us, we'll make sure that that's covered as well. So when you think of that as it's a grid essentially that we're filling out, you will have rent point, number of units occupied, any units that are vacant. And from that, you can slice and dice the data to what is the current vacant rent versus the current occupied rent. It allows you to do that. What I should really stress here too is our definition of vacant. You can see there in bold, we have kind of a flag for our enumerators. You need to confirm no vacant unit has been re-rented and that they're not undergoing extensive renovations. So let me talk first about vacancy. Our definition of vacant is the unit has to be physically unoccupied. There can't already be a lease signed for that unit. So it has to satisfy those two conditions to be considered vacant. So physically empty and available to immediate rent, like no other tenant has signed a lease and the unit's not already spoken for, basically. If we find out also that a unit is undergoing major renovations, this is not rent readying the unit. This is not like them just quickly doing a clean and maybe some paint touch-ups. This is major renovations. If any units are under major renovations, for us, if you're thinking of it from a vacancy rate calculation standpoint, we remove the unit. We do not consider it vacant. We also remove it from the denominator. We don't even consider it part of the stock. So any units under extensive renovation are removed both from the numerator and the denominator in the vacancy rate calculation. We gather data on the turnover rate in the building, both by bedroom type and overall for the units. This question is tricky. We don't get as high a response rate on this one. Our definition of turnover is how many times the units changed occupancy over the past 12 months. And we include residents that have moved between different units within the same building. And you can have a turnover rate exceeding 100%, okay, potentially. And then like I mentioned, we ask at least 3 questions about the arrears. We have kept this question on since COVID times, and we haven't dropped it yet. That's always been a debate every year whether we keep this question. But we ask how many units are in arrears in this building. Again, this is rent is 30 days past due. How does that compare to what was experienced last year? That's more of a qualitative question. Was it better, about the same, or worse than last year? And then how much rent in dollars is in arrears? So we get both the units and the dollar amount, outstanding rent amount in dollars that's in arrears from those questions. I mentioned earlier that we do gather information on the various amenities. So we know that we know whether it's a townhouse or an apartment building. We know its size. We know when it was completed construction, so we know its age. But we also ask, it's a kind of a 1 or 0 type of question in our data set. It's yes or no. So we ask things about um, uh, heat. Is heat included in rent? Hot water, lights, is cable or internet? Is parking included in the rent? Are the units furnished? And this is for, it has to be for the majority of the units. More than half the units should have those services, those amenities included in the rent. The only question that's not yes, no is appliances. And that is just a count. We'll just ask them for a count of the number of appliances included in the units. Next, I'll just talk a little bit about data suppression. If any of you used our data or explored it on the portal, you may notice that we will suppress the data for two main reasons, and I'll talk about those in a second. The way that we represent that is with a star, basically asterisks, 2 stars in our data tables. Just means that the data has been suppressed, and it's either one of 2 reasons. One is it's suppressed for confidentiality. That means that we got, for any given cell, any slicing or dicing that we do, if any given cell has less than 4 responding structures contributing to that estimate, we will suppress it to maintain the confidentiality of the folks that, the buildings that did give us a response. We also suppress based on reliability. If there's just too much variability in the estimate, I like to say, like, if the responding buildings, they're representatives of those buildings, if they're giving us widely different vacant unit counts or wildly vacant rents, the data, there could be too much variance in the estimate, and it's not reliable enough to publish. And we base that on the coefficient of variation. And that's simply, we just take the standard error of the estimate itself and we divide it by the mean, the estimate itself, which is essentially a mean, an average. If it's above certain threshold cutoffs for us for reliability, and we have different cutoffs depending on what we're publishing, we will suppress that. It's expressed as a percentage, as a proportion. Okay, that coefficient of variation. I'll just quickly show you. I'm not going to be a full-blown portal demo, but I'll just quickly show you just some of the ways in which we slice and dice the data. I'll actually just for in the interest of time, I'll just dive into one of our estimates, which is average rent. So when you land on the portal, you can use what I call our vanity link, which is cmhc.ca/HMI portal. If you use that simple vanity link, you get this convoluted address that you never have to memorize. You don't even have to bookmark. And you'll be presented with Canada first. And you'll be presented with, you'll be presented with some summary statistics on 2 bedrooms. That's the most common bedroom type in the rental market, in the purpose-built rental market. You'll be presented with some things like a year-over-year comparison of vacancy rates, average and median rents for 2 bedrooms. And when you get to the full view, that's where you sort of get access to the full, the full compendium of pre-aggregated data that we disseminate through the portal. And I'm just going to show you an example in Calgary. If I go to the primary rental market and just do that average rent, you'll see that by default, it's always the townhouse and apartment combined, but you can separate those out into the different structure types. Almost always presented by bedroom type with a total, so overall, so all the units. So this is, when I select a Calgary, it actually defaults to what we call the CMHC zone. That is not a StatsCan standard geographical classification. That is us stitching together various census tracts. We worked with our analysts to identify various key submarkets within various CMAs. This is just presenting it by bedroom type, but as you can see, you can go by age. These are a little clunky and old, but as you can see, we can go by age. So buildings built before 1960 and after 2000, what do the rents look like? What do they look like by size of unit? So here we can isolate it by bedroom type and go by size of unit. This is for the apartment category only. And from there, you could get a sense of like more of the mid-range or low rise units versus what are rents in some of the high rise apartment structures. As you can see, there's lots of other display options, particularly by geography. We do our sampling in a way that tries to ensure that we can release at least reliable statistics at our CMHC zone level. But as you can see in the portal, the data does go down to the census tract level. So I'll just use Calgary again as an example. That's just because that's where I'm located. I'm most familiar with this town. So this is that downtown zone that I was mentioning. But as you can see, the downtown zone is broken into different neighborhoods. For those familiar with Calgary, there's Eau Claire, etc. We have Sun Alta, Scarborough off to the west. But then also the corresponding census tracts from the latest census as well. So the data is divided to the census tract level, and if it's publishable, it will be available. As you scroll down, there's a good example of our suppression, but as you scroll down, you do tend to run into data that's more variable, or there's fewer responding structures, so you get that suppression for confidentiality. But all that to say, though, is you can get rental market estimates sliced and diced right down to the CT level in many cases through our portal. I'll go back to my presentation deck. I do invite you to explore the portal if you want to just get even more of a sense of how we slice and dice the data. And then in terms of the RDC, so what's included? What we loaded to the RDC and what essentially has been published. We had a little issue with publishing where only 1 year was published. We are currently in the process of working with StatsCan to publish all the years. I believe they've have them all published, but what we have is basically record or the address level responses. Keep in mind that this is not households that we're surveying. These are buildings. So each unit within the RDC corresponds to a building. So anytime you see them refer to a unit in the RDC vetting rules, that's going to be a building. So we essentially have each building level response for the past 35 years, soon to be 36 years, because we will load 2025 microdata soon. So it's the 35 years of the RMS cycles starting in 1989. That's when we migrated over to our current, at the time, state-of-the-art mainframe IT systems back in the 80s. So we have the micro level data back till then. So it's an amazingly long time series, which I think will enrich any research that you folks might be wanting to do. It includes all sampled and unsampled buildings. So whether we sampled them or not, whether we got a response or not, it's all there. It's all there. And Pierre will correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 250,000 structures, something like that. It's a pretty big data set. It will include all of our calculated survey weights as well. So we have unit weights, rent weights, the rent overlap flags and weights that we use to do same sample rental comparisons, things like that. So all of our weighting, our pre-calculated weights for everything will be included in the file. And then finally, the RDC vetting rules. So you have to bear with me or forgive me. We are not super familiar with everything related to the RDC. This is our first kind of jump into this area. We're happy to be doing this now for researchers because we wanted to expose our data more to researchers. But for the vetting rules, all I can say is that the guidelines have been provided to me, but I have not yet, StatScan has not yet shared the actual thresholds with me. You will get the detailed vetting rules once your research proposal is approved. I believe. Grant will correct me on that. It's going to include typical rules that many of you are likely familiar with, right? There'll be rules around rounding minimum counts, your use of weighting, ensuring no cell dominance, right? There's going to be specific rules for tabular versus if you're using it as model inputs or if you're using it in graphs or mapping. There's going to be specific rules around those instances, just depending on how you're going to be using it. Geographies they're going to be along the standard SGC hierarchy. And of course, if you're doing any kind of customized geographies, there's rules around ensuring no residual disclosure when you do that sort of overlapping of custom geographies. And like I say, the thresholds have not yet been shared with CMHC, so I apologize. I don't have all the exact details around that. But again, this will all be shared with you as you submit research proposals and things like that. I'll just end with just a few quick use cases. And I believe there's one on here that I should probably talk about as well. So just remind me, hot, cold rents, if I don't talk about those. So just to give you an idea, these are just examples of some of the things that my team has done. Again, like I mentioned earlier, my team in data dissemination, we're responsible for doing custom outputs for clients if it's not slice and dice sort of the way they want it. So some of the ones that we do is like the graph you see on the right there, average rents of vacant versus occupied units. This was a market insights analysis that they're doing. They're wanting to see the differential. It gives you an idea of sort of the power of the market in terms of what landlords could ask for rents. You could see it kind of flipped around 2015 and sort of hasn't looked back since then. So that's just one example, right? We can isolate empty units. What are the asking rents versus what's the current rent levels for those who are continue to choose to occupy their units. The one on the bottom here, this table, it's maybe a little hard to read, but a few years ago, our market insights folks came to us and said, hey, we want to look at income ranges within various income quintiles. We want to tie that to rent ranges that match, a tenant or a person making that income. We want to match that to our affordability criteria of, ensuring they're not paying more than 30% of their income in rent. And give us a picture of the stock in those income quintiles. And that's what we did here. Shima Tavasali, who's on the call, developed this table. And she works with our market insights folks to produce this table. So what you can see here is it just gives you an idea of how much of the stock is sitting empty at those various quintile income ranges for those units or that portion of the stock that's affordable to those income ranges, right? So that's what's sitting empty and what is the count of the units? How much of the stock is just sitting there in those ranges? So very, very interesting data from a market analysis perspective. I think it's quite interesting to the city of Vancouver, which I think they've been trying to develop policies to identify and preserve stock priced at certain levels. Well, that's kind of what that sort of table can help do by slicing and dicing our rental market survey data. The other one I just want to mention, because I don't think I have it in this presentation, is hot and cold rents. Remember, I showed you the amenities that we collect. There's a sort of a yes, no for heat. Well, we oftentimes have people saying, oh, well, can you please give me the average rent for units with and without heat included in their rents? And so we can do that. I call it hot and cold rents. And you can do that across all those different amenities that you see. Are lights included or not? Is hot water included or not? Hydro, is it included or not? Spatial analysis, we can use it as well for spatial analysis. This is not a pure example. I'm going to admit this is not a pure example of spatial analysis because we never plotted this. We actually did this for the city of Vancouver. They were They are extending an existing, or they're planning to extend an existing line. It's called the Broadway Subway plan, Broadway Subway line. It's going to introduce 6 new stations, and they wanted to ensure that the benefits of the station locations were maximized, and they wanted to do some work around preservation of the stock around these lines, and so they want to take stock of they want a stock of our rental market data. Basically, what did the stock look like? What did the rental stock look like before this line is going to be put in place? And what we did was we gathered census tracts. Those were kind of the best representative areas that were around the subway area, and then we outputted various metrics just in terms of combining certain census tracts and just giving them a picture of the stock and the price of units at various rent points along the subway line. Again, I'm kind of stretching it a little bit when I say spatial, but this could have been presented spatially for them. We chose not to do that, or we didn't do that for them. But that is just one example of a use case with our RMS data. And then, of course, from a modeling perspective, our inputs are used for our own vacancy rate and rental growth forecasts, right? We do a roughly a 2 to 3 year housing market outlook horizon, where our economists forecast what vacancy rates and rents will be in various markets, key markets in Canada. So it's used for forecasting. There's various multiple regression econometric models as part of our former housing market assessment. So we used to use the vacancy rate was an input to a model regarding excess inventory. That was one of the measures that were part of that housing market assessment that provided us what we called evidence of imbalances in given markets. So our rental market data was critical for that. We have some folks within our residential underwriting that is using our data to do some predictive models. We have one outside company as well that we provide some mask data to, very specialized mask data to. It allows them to predict risk of a project going into default, rental projects going into default. Helps predict the valuations of those buildings, things like that. It can be tools for risk management, like I mentioned on our multiple underwriting side. Could also be used in indices. I don't know of any instances where we're using it in indices, but you could potentially use our rental market data to do various indices as well, perhaps. And that pretty much is the end of what I wanted to walk you through. And hopefully, I really do hope that I gave you, in just, it was only 40 minutes. I hope I did give you an idea, familiarized you a little bit with how we collect our rental market data, what that data is going to be all about in the RDC. Hope you're excited about it. We're certainly happy to be providing this to you folks for research purposes. And yeah, I guess we'll open it up now. Hey, Grant, to any questions.
We sure will. So feel free to, oh, there's a hand already. Go ahead, Daniel.
Hi, thanks. I might screw up the jargon that you guys use, so just
No problem.
don't beat me up or kill me on a technicality. But I think you're when you open this discussion about the data that was available in the RDC, you talked about primary and secondary market. So it's primary market stuff, what you were listing, like big buildings, stuff that's built to rent to people.
Correct.
One of my interests in general is like low income and homelessness and the relationship between that and finding a place to live. And so when I think about the places I lived when I was doing like my master's degree, this would be like a room in somebody's house or like a basement. And this is or like a house that someone else is renting. Secondary market, right? That is the secondary market. How good of a job are we doing on tracking that? And And I guess the next question is like, is it available in the RDC? Do you see it being available in the RDC?
There'll be a component available in the RDC. There's probably more that can be done, if I'm being honest, Daniel.
Uh-huh.
Uh, you touch on a few things. One of which I should have mentioned from the outset, and I'm sorry I didn't. One is that you're right. This rental market data. So for the purposes of this presentation and the data set I'm talking about now that's been published to the RDC, this is indeed, like you said, the purpose built. And that's exactly what it means, right? We are tracking through our starts and completion survey those developers, those builders that are introducing purpose-built. That is the intended market, right? They're introducing that building for the rental market, only to rent out the units. Because of that too, one of the criteria for us, and it's tied to our start survey, is that the units have to be self-contained. So SROs are not included, right? Rooming houses, things like that are not included in our rental
What's an
market
SRO?
SRO
is
single rental, I always forget the term. It's basically rooming houses.
Okay.
Single room occupancy, right?
Thank you. Single room occupancy. Yeah. So those are excluded from it, just by nature of the fact that our starts define, any starts have to be self-contained. So they have to have their own full kitchen, bathroom that's not shared. They have to have their own entryway, either from a common hallway inside the building or from a staircase or doorway outside of the dwelling unit, outside of the structure. And so because of that type of housing that you'd consider more secondary rental market, and it is, right, it's not part of the frame of this survey. It's outside the frame. Years ago, we did do a random telephone survey where we tried to estimate the number of households living in things like basement suites, SROs, like rooming houses, those single units above a garage, things like that. We discontinued that because it became really difficult to, with the advent, like with more people using cell phones, it was very difficult to get people on the phone and verify that they actually live in the CMA that we were surveying on.
Right.
So it became very difficult. So we abandoned that survey. But we do have what we call our condominium apartment survey, or CAS. And we do hope to release the condominium apartment survey data to the RDC as well in the future. So the condominium apartment survey is our last remaining survey that we didn't discontinue. We have that provides just a little snapshot of what I'd call the secondary rental market, because what it is it's a survey of all the condominium apartment owners who actually choose to rent out their condominium apartment unit, right? The buildings were built intended for the condominium market or the strata title market, but the owners of those units are renting them out. That remains our only picture at this point, Daniel, of the secondary rental market, and we do hope to release that at some point once we release our starts and completion survey data.
Okay, so
a long-winded answer, or short answer to it, is that what you just talked about there is it's outside the frame of this data set.
Okay, so you're in Calgary. I remember when I was in Calgary, like years ago, there'd be stories about Fort McMurray, someone's renting their garage for like $1 bazillion. And right now, that kind of like interesting factoid is not being tracked outside of like the news. Like there's no systematic tracking of this in Canada?
No, not by us. I don't know of any other data providers who are.
Oh, okay.
I'm not aware of
CMHC.
any. No.
Okay, thank you.
But not us, no.
Okay, Leah.
Yeah.
Hello. Thanks for this presentation. I'm excited to know that this is going to be available on the RDC and that there's going to be even more CMHC data available on the RDC. My question is about linking data. So obviously there's data you said at the building level, which I imagine the buildings are all geocode and there's geographic data associated with the buildings.
There is.
So then I'm wondering about like linking it, for example, to the census. through the dissemination area level. Is that so? I guess maybe this is like a Grant/Ian question about data linkages, because I can imagine linking it to, for example, Canadian Community Health Survey data, or
Right.
like other kind of like, I'm an environmental health researcher, so interested in like housing and health. So yeah, curious about linkage.
Yeah,
Oh,
more of a Grant question for sure.
yeah. Well, let me take this one at least off the hop. So
Yeah.
first of all, is it Leia?
Leia, yeah, like Star
Yeah.
Wars. Yeah.
Like Star Wars. Okay, very good. So in your proposal, never use the word linkage to talk about matching geographies, just because that sends red flags through everything.
Okay.
Uh, so
Good
you're
to know.
matching, you're not linking, as far as I can tell. But yeah, no, you should be able to match on geographies, like, and it'll be a combination of the disclosure rules for the survey you're using and for the CMHC data on how tight you can get. So it's going to depend on, how many, and certainly for the CCHS, you're not going to wind up with enough people in a dissemination area or in like a subdivision or like really small census geographies to be able to release anything. That's going to blow the small cell whistle every time. Um, if you're looking at like sort of contextual things, using the census, probably fine. But again, it's sort of matching and not linking. If you are talking about linking, like sort of household like by address to the census, that would be like a custom product, and it would have to go through a whole privacy impact assessment and everything. So
Yeah.
that's sort of my answer to that.
It doesn't sound like you could necessarily do a linkage with addresses, because you wouldn't know necessarily what address or what unit the person's in, so that the rental survey data, for example, wouldn't necessarily has like number of units per building in different bedroom number categories or whatever, but you wouldn't be able to like,
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to match it to the unit level, but if you knew the address, you could get a custom product that was like, okay, here's a blown up uh, copy of the rental market survey data that has like sort of the prices for the units in this building, for one bedrooms, two bedrooms, three bedrooms and stuff. And then maybe you can interpolate based on, the answers to the census, which actually does have some questions about housing, what size of apartment they live in and what you can impute their rent to likely be. Uh, but again, that's like a custom data product, and that would have to go through the privacy impact assessment with StackHan, and it would have to be cleared with CMHC to create that custom product. So that's a bit more far flung, but it's not impossible. It's just a question of time and resources.
okay. And then
I think you'll hit a roadblock with individual building. Like you'll definitely be pulling up to a higher geography.
for sure. Yeah. So my last question for Ian, the other data that you said CMHC is going to be putting into the RDC, is there anywhere I can read more about that?
Yeah, if I would say, so for us, it will be the starts and completions survey and what we call our market absorption survey. That'll go next. We already provided them with the 30 some odd years of history of that. We have not yet done the condominium apartment survey. I would say if you want to read more about it, first, obviously, I would just do a Google search, or if you remember that vanity link for the portal, you can explore our data there. It would largely be, am I still presenting? I think so.
You are, yeah.
Okay. Leia, it will be the data sets under new housing construction and primary rental market. This is what will be coming next. It'll be this sort of data set here under new housing construction. And then I will I'll put a link in here to our survey methods. It goes through all of our survey methods, so all the different surveys that we have. Like in addition to the rental market survey and the starts and completions market absorption survey, we also have that condominium apartment survey, which is a snapshot of the secondary condominium apartment rental market. And then also our newest survey is the social and affordable housing survey. I'm not sure yet whether we're going to be able to release that data to the RDC, but we do have a survey on our social and affordable housing. It's our newest survey. And so they're all described in the survey methods page. So I'll find that link really quick here, and I'll pop it in the chat. And that'll familiarize you with just the various surveys that we conduct. And if you look on the portal, it'll give you an idea of just some of the data that is within those data sets. At least our take on how we sort of slice and dice it. And then you can always reach out to us if you have any other questions. I'll also include an email address for my team.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, we have time for a few more short questions.
I'll just grab that.
Yep.
I'll grab that link right now, Grant, while we wait.
Sure, no worries.
It just looks like this, Leia. There's all the different surveys there that we do. And I'm not used to using Zoom. Hopefully that works. There we go. And my team can be reached through what we call our housing market information mailbox at hminformationmh@cmhc.ca. I'll pop that in the chat as well.
And just so everyone knows, I know Ian said that he's already transferred some of the data over to StatCan. There's a whole process on the StatCan side to come up with vetting rules and to format and do stuff for the RDC program. So it can take, between 2 and 4 months. So, with that timeline in mind, I'm not going to promise anything, but conservatively, maybe March or April of next year, things are ready. But don't hold us to that because you're not the boss of this, I guess.
Yeah, well, most of it is done. We did run into a little hiccup where I don't know what happened, but they only published one of the 30 years. We were like, why did you do that? And so they corrected that. I believe it has been corrected. I haven't talked to them in a little while. They've been pretty busy. And they did provide me with the vetting guidelines, but no thresholds. So, but I know they have been approved.
Okay.
That's all been done. That's all behind us. Yeah.
Very good. And then as far as like methodology for the RMS goes, we can find that all here. Does it have kind of a decent time horizon for the full 30 or whatever years of data, or have there been some major changes to how the data are collected?
Yeah, good question, Grant. Generally, no, generally a lot of the metrics that we collect have remained the same for years, for the whole thing. There are some things that you will see that will come and go, some variables that you'll see that will come and go. But it's all detailed in an accompanying data dictionary that we developed for Statistics Canada, as well as a user guide. We also developed a user guide with some examples of just some of the code that we use when working with the data. So we do hope that will be useful to any researchers. So
I'm sure.
Yeah, so you'll get a sense, to answer your question, Grant, like you will get a sense of variable, every single variable that's in there, and I forget how many, like Shima probably knows off the top of her head how many variables are there, but the variable existence through time is all mentioned in the data dictionary that will accompany the release. Yeah.
Okay. Ian, if I may, maybe one thing that has been added recently is the turnover information and the turnover rent, which is quite important because if you're living in your apartment for 10 years, your rent usually stays stable, does not go as up as other places. And we added, I think, since 2022, if I'm not wrong, the turnover information and turnover rent. That is more something that look at the asking rent or what would be a unit would be going for per se. So that has been added recently, so it was not there before.
Yeah, that's a good example of a new variable. And then you'll see many years with no arrears questions asked also. And
because it started with the COVID.
It started with COVID, exactly. Yeah, those are two good. That's a good example, Pierre. It's the turnover. That's a relatively new variable collected for us. Yeah.
All right. Well, we are coming up on time, and does anyone have any parting thoughts, parting questions? You can always reach Ian and his team at the email address that's in the chat there. And we'll thank everyone for their time. Hope everyone has a great afternoon.